Hello and welcome to my channel. Today is Saturday and that means it's time for another episode of True Crime Tales. Today we're going to be talking about Roberto v. Arguelles, known as the Salt Lake City Strangler. As always, content warning, gets graphic. We talk about graphic crimes, we talk about bad guys, we talk about the bad stuff that bad guys do. So, without further ado, let's get started. Roberto v. Arguelles, and I might be pronouncing that wrong. I did try to kind of like find a translation of it, but like, sorry if it's wrong. Known as the Salt Lake City Strangler, was an American serial killer and sex offender who, while serving a life term for child molestation, confessed to raping and killing at least one woman and 3 teenagers in West Valley City, Utah, from February to March 1992. So yeah. Killed 4 people in a month. That's impressive, but you know, not cool. He later pleaded guilty and was sentenced to death for the murders, but died from a bowel obstruction at the Utah State Prison before the sentence could be carried out. Roberto v. Arguelles was born on February 14th, 1962, in Kearns, Utah, one of 2 brothers. Also, going forward, I'm just going to call him Roberto. I don't like to do that with the serial killers because I feel like it humanizes them, but it's easier to pronounce and it just sounds better. Little is publicly available about his childhood, but at an early age, and I do mean little, because like I could not find anything about his home and or family life. Yeah, but at an early age, his stepfather moved the family to a pig farm in Salt Lake City, where the 2 boys worked very hard. Roberto committed his first crime at age 15 when he was caught trying to steal a car in September of 1977, but was placed on probation, which, I mean, I can understand, not a big deal. I mean, it's a big deal. Grand Theft Auto. Not a good thing to do. Don't do that. But not like, you know, red flag, I'm gonna go out and murder somebody now type bad. His behavior only worsened after his release, as in June 1978, he was sent to a youth shelter for beating up his girlfriend, brother, and mother. Now we're kind of getting into that, like, you know, stage where I was like, y'all really didn't, like, think, he might need some help. He remained there for around a month, successfully escaping on one occasion but returning 6 days later before he was allowed to return home. On October 5th, committed his first known violent crime by kidnapping and molesting a 10-year-old girl, but instead of being interned, the juvenile court placed him under house arrest. Like, he wasn't even an adult making decisions to harm children, and they were just like, we're not going to commit him though. We're not going to like put him in and like commit him. What we're gonna do is nothing. Roberto remained on the police's radar, and in November of that year would be charged with molesting a 7-year-old, but the charge was later dropped. And from what I understand, the charges were dropped because the little girl could not face her accuser in court, and that's very understandable, and I feel for that little girl. But that is essentially why the charges were dropped. There was no one to corroborate what had happened to this little girl if she didn't testify. So, while awaiting trial on the molestation charges, Roberto was charged with the February 1979 rape of a 17-year-old girl. He was found guilty for both charges and thereafter placed in the State Youth Development Center in Ogden with the recommendation that he be detained, until he was 21 years old. However, the hospital staff, who had no therapy program for juvenile sex offenders, attempted to have Roberto transferred to the Utah State Hospital, who rejected the proposal, saying that Roberto was unmotivated for treatment. After all other ideas, including sending him to California for additional treatment, failed, Roberto was released on December 19th of 1979, with the only condition being that he attended periodic meetings with the sociology graduate student in the University of Utah for therapy. A grad student. Like, not even like a full-blown shrink, but a grad student. Okay. This decision proved insufficient, as on March 3rd, 1980, Roberto kidnapped a 15-year-old Granger high school student and drove her to an old shooting range where he sodomized and raped her. After finishing, he threatened that he would kill her if she told anyone before dropping her off in front of school. 3 days later, he picked up a 14-year-old girl who was on her way to Westlake Junior High, drove her to a dirt road near his stepfather's farm, where he sodomized and raped her under the threat of a knife. The victim resisted, prompting Roberto to slash her throat before dropping her off in a residential neighborhood in West Valley City. The girl managed to walk to a nearby house and asked for her medical help, which she received at the Pioneer Valley Hospital. After she was treated for her injuries, the student gave a detailed description of her attacker and his truck, eventually leading to Roberto's arrest. He confessed to both attacks and later pleaded guilty before an adult court to 2 counts of attempted murder, aggravated rape, and sexual abuse. He was transferred to the Utah State Prison to serve his sentence, with his appeals for parole rejected on several occasions by concerned board members. And, this would be the end of this segment. That is where it had stopped, and he had spent, and he had served like a life sentence or something. But no, obviously this is not the end of the story here. It'd be really short. And he was finally paroled on June 25th of 1991. They had a chance. They had a chance. They had him in jail. On August 1st, 1992, posing as a security guard, Roberto approached 2 siblings, a 10-year-old girl and an 8-year-old boy, in front of the Orchard Elementary School in West Valley City. I'm so sorry. Claiming that he wanted help with finding some stolen goods. Real quick, I have had RSV for a few days. I've had it for over a couple of weeks now. And I still, when I get winded, I yawn. It's kind of like my body's way of signaling, hey, we can't breathe, maybe we need to take a break and come back to this. But that's what that was. I'm not bored or trying to be disrespectful. I'm just dealing with illness. On August 1st, 1992, posing as a security guard, Roberto approached 2 siblings, a 10-year-old girl and an 8-year-old boy. Stop it. In front of the Orchard Elementary School in West Valley City, claiming that he wanted help with finding some stolen goods. Under the pretense of frisking them, he ordered them to pull down their pants, touching the boys' genitalia and patting the girls' crotch before dropping them off at their home. A week later, he stopped in front of the Hunter High School and, using a fake police badge, attempted to entice 2 10-year-old girls into his car. However, he was spotted by a highway worker who immediately notified the police, who arrested Arguelles shortly after. He was then charged with molesting the siblings from Orchard Elementary School, for which he was found guilty and sentenced to life imprisonment, still with the possibility of parole. At the sentencing, Justice Kenneth Rigtrup gave an explicit recommendation that the parole option hopefully should never be applied, citing Roberto's history of recidivism and increasingly deviant sexual crimes. Now, recidivism, it's a big word. This is an SAT word. Let me fix this camera. I don't know why I'm all in the corner there. But anyway, so recidivism is really just a fancy way of saying that this is a repeat behavior. And it probably should have stayed that way. But in this was the point where it should have been completely, oh yeah, I did it. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life in prison because I did it. But, that's somehow that never seems to be what actually happens. And then before we know it, they've committed a new crime and we're right back where we started. So, give me a second, guys. Over the next 3 years, Roberto served in obscurity, occasionally bragging to cellmates about supposedly abusing and killing a few young girls and women in 1992, in addition to making ransom demands from their families. These claims eventually attracted the attention of police investigators who decided to interview him in July of 95. In the first interview, Roberto confessed to the murders of 16-year-old Lisa Martinez and 15-year-old Tuesday Roberts, both of whom had vanished while walking towards the Valley Fair Mall on March 30th, 1992. He then directed them to grave sites near his stepfather's pig farm, where authorities found the two girls' bodies. In his confessions, Roberto said that he had stabbed Martinez at least 43 times with a wood chisel before strangling Roberts with a rope. Several months later, he confessed to two additional murders, those of 42-year-old janitor Margot Bond, who vanished en route to her job at the Kennedy Junior High School in February of 92, only to be found stabbed to death 4 months later in Toole County. The other being 13-year-old Stephanie Blundell, who was stabbed to death a month later in the American Fort Canyon. His claims were backed up by Pamela Milston, a prison inmate who had lived with Roberto and his mother at their trailer in Kearns, who said that he had shown her some of Blundell's jewelry following her murder. After leading the authorities to their grave sites, Roberto was later charged in all 4 deaths. While the supposed stolen jewelry and other items potentially linking him to the victims were never recovered, it was surmised that Roberto or somebody associated with him had disposed of them. Before he brought on murder charges, Roberto's lawyers sought to have his sex offenses convictions overturned on the ground that he had ineffective counsel. This plea was shot down by the Utah Supreme Court, who reaffirmed the convictions. When brought to trial in May of 97, Roberto almost instantly announced his intention to plead guilty and waived his rights to appeal the upcoming convictions, stressing that he wished to be executed for his crimes. Now, a lot of people think that's so unusual, but I've actually done a few segments where it's not uncommon that the killer themselves is seeking the death penalty, but it does, to me, when they want it, sound like it's an easy way out, and they should have to suffer a little at least, right? Like in addition, he also opted to represent himself at a sentencing hearing, which was granted by presiding Justice David Young. During the trial, he appeared either uninterested or unaware of the witness's testimony against him and banned the press from taking his photograph, deeming it distracting. Nonetheless, Roberto went on to question several witnesses, including the detective who had questioned him after his attempted murder conviction. While his stand-in attorneys, who were chosen to act as his advisors, suggested that their client suffered from blackouts and even possibly had a multiple personality disorder, such as DID. Roberto continued his attempts to give himself a death sentence, explicitly proclaiming that he wished the judge, not the jury, hand it down to him. On June 21st, 1997, Roberto was sentenced to death for the 4 murders, with his chosen method being the firing squad. Unfortunately, he requested that once his execution date comes, that the traditional black cap put over inmates' heads not be used, as he wanted to see death coming. The initial date was set for August 22nd, which was automatically appealed to the Utah High Courts. His attorneys criticized the decision, pointing out the possibility that Roberto suffered from mental abnormalities. A year later, while awaiting the outcome of his appeals, Roberto unsuccessfully attempted to hang himself. After this, his behavior became even more erratic, as he began to eat his own feces, as well as pieces of paper and plastic, and twice had to be taken to the hospital for intestinal blockages. So sad. Whenever he had to appear in court, he had to be strapped in a wheelchair and a mesh mask put over his head. When I read that and I decided to put that in here, I legitimately, all I could think of was Hannibal Lecter. And I'm like, is that maybe where, like, the inspiration came from to have that? I mean, I know, like, Hannibal Lecter's cannibal, right? Like, and I actually think a lot of, like, Hannibal Lecter is based on, like, a cross between, like, Ed Gein, or Gein, and Jeffrey Dahmer. But, like, just the mask is where I was like, I wonder if that's where they got the idea for the mask. And, like, the straitjacket, and then they would, like, basically strap him to a dolly and bring him in, you know what I mean? So, like, I was wondering if maybe that's where they got the inspiration for that from. I'm assuming, like, when people want to make movies like this, that there's research done. So I'm just kind of, like, in my brain, I was wondering, like, do you think they came across that while they were researching, like, serial killers they could base this guy off of, and they were like, you know what? That would work. It sounds good. Whenever he had to appear in court, he had to be strapped in a wheelchair and a mesh mask put over his head to prevent him from spitting on anybody in the room. On November 15th, 2003, a guard passing by Roberto's cell noticed that he was unusually quiet, and upon closer inspection, realized that he was... Once responsive and awake, he refused any further treatment. After several hours of observation, he became... oh, shoot, wait, no. I heard that backwards. On November 15, 2003, a guard passing by Roberto's cell noticed that he was unusually quiet, and upon closer inspection, realized that he was, not dead. He was, unconscious. Once responsive and awake, he refused any further treatment. After several hours of observation, he became unresponsive again, and life-saving efforts were attempted, but he was pronounced dead. He was determined to have died from bowel obstruction. I mean, I guess that makes sense. Like, he ate paper and plastic and all kinds of crazy shit. So, like, he died before he ever even got to, like, the firing squad. And, like, it just kills me, though, because he was, like, basically like, yeah, I did it. Just kill me. And they still made them do all the appeals. Like, I feel like if they're willing to waive their appeals, then don't continue to push it. Like, just be like, they didn't want them. They want to be done. They want... You know, so, like, I don't understand that. I don't understand why they continued filing appeals when he flat out said he didn't want any more appeals. Just saying. Anyway, thanks for hanging out with me today. As always, make good choices, don't do anything I wouldn't do, and be cautiously kind to others. Have a wonderful weekend, and I'll see you guys next week. Bye!